Alright guys, we are back in my garage for another video, and today we're going to be talking about why I did a sway bar upgrade with a completely stock suspension setup. And I just kind of wanted to share my thoughts in this video because I know a lot of you guys are expecting me to go to coilovers or springs, and eventually that might happen. But I think in the meantime, you're wondering why it's taking so long or why I'm doing so many other upgrades without changing out my suspension components. And I think a lot of that confusion is just due to not fully understanding how the suspension works. And I can kind of explain my goals in this video because I am tracking the car and I want to give it the best handling possible. So in this video, we'll talk a little bit more about how sway bars work and why you might want to upgrade them. And yeah, hopefully you guys find this video useful.
Now, as always, for everybody that's new to the channel, I create these videos to help keep you updated on the latest developments in our community, as well as discuss technical topics so that we have a better understanding of how our engines work. So if you're interested in more videos like that, be sure to subscribe because there will be a lot more coming out in the future.
So first of all, let's talk about how sway bars work. And the concept is pretty simple. You're basically adding a stiff bar to connect both sides of your suspension. So for example, if we look at our suspension on the front, you have your strut, and that strut has a bracket that's welded onto it. That bracket is bolted onto an end link, and then that end link is bolted to your sway bar. So the sway bar is physically connecting both struts underneath the car. Now, what happens when you go over bumps is, your suspension is going to compress or extend as you're going around turns. Obviously the car leans, so that compresses one side of the suspension while allowing the other side of the suspension to droop. When you're going through those turns, the sway bar is still connecting both sides of your suspension. And that sway bar has a set amount of, rigidity built into it. So when you're going around that turn, you're basically going to have one side pushing down on the sway bar and the other side pulling up on the sway bar, and that's going to twist it. So the sway bar itself is resisting that twisting motion, which in essence reduces your body roll. So that's really why they call it an anti-sway bar, because as the car sways, the sway bar is going to twist, and as it gets tighter, it's going to resist the turning more, and you're going to resist how much the car wants to lean going through a turn. Now, the good news is there are upgrades available, and as you guys have seen with my recent videos, I went with H&R sway bars. Those are basically the biggest sway bars that we can get for our car, so it reduces body roll the most, and they also are completely solid designs. The stock bars and a lot of other aftermarket bars are actually hollow, and in a lot of cases that's not an issue, but I just like knowing that I have the strongest material and the strongest design on my car, so I don't have any issues in the future, because especially when you get into really hardcore racing, there are cases where you can snap a sway bar. So having a thick, solid design lets me know that I'm going to be giving my car the best handling possible and resisting the car's body roll. Now, I do think that another interesting thing about this is a lot of people end up going with coilovers and springs and all of these other upgrades in order to reduce the body roll on their car. And I understand the assumption is you just want to stiffen things, but in reality, having as much suspension travel as possible is going to give you the best handling. If you think about a rally suspension, for example, they have some really long travel, so that way the wheels can stay in contact with the road as much as possible. Of course, in those scenarios, they're going over crazy terrain where they can experience a lot of dips and bumps and things that they need to be able to compensate for. So most street cars don't need that much suspension travel, but even on a track, you can run into sections where it's a little bit bumpy. Maybe you want to take a curb to get the car a little bit faster and straighten out a turn as much as possible. And so you want the car to have as much suspension travel as possible. Otherwise, when you stiffen things up, you run into scenarios where the car wants to, skip over a bump instead of absorbing the bump. And that can unsettle the car and just make it a lot more difficult to handle when you're taking it around turns quickly. So that's why I went with a sway bar upgrade instead of, a coilover or a spring upgrade. That might happen in the future because it does bring a lot of other benefits like lowering your center of gravity and things like that. But I like to attack things directly based on my feedback and my experience. And when I was going around the track, the body roll was horrendous. You can see in some clips of people following me the entire car would swing from left to right. Granted, it was manageable. The car was still plenty quick, but I knew that was a limiting factor that I wanted to correct before I went back to the track so that I could reduce my body roll. And it definitely provided a significant difference. If I haven't already at this point, make sure you stick around. I will be posting a track day video for my next track day to show you guys how much faster the car got. So it's kind of a win-win all around for me. You're basically reducing your body roll without completely sacrificing, the comfort of your suspension when you're driving around town. Now, I will admit it does stiffen things up a little bit because it reduces the independence of your suspension. So if you're going over like a speed bump or something like that, you might not notice it as much. But if you have like a big pothole and only one wheel drops in, then you might feel a little bit more stiffness in the car. And it does also stiffen up the steering, especially for the front sway bar. Again, it just gives you like a more direct feel, and it makes your suspension components work together a little bit more. So stiffening that up is something that the driver can directly feel inside of the car. Usually they recommend replacing or upgrading the front sway bar if you have too much oversteer. So basically the rear end is kicking out and it's really difficult to control. And they recommend upgrading the rear sway bar if you have too much understeer. So that means when you're going into a turn, it feels like it's just plowing straight through. Maybe the front wheels don't feel like they're very responsive. So you can upgrade your rear sway bar to stiffen that up, and that'll make the car rotate more. In my case, I upgraded both because in my experience, the car didn't really have a lot of understeer, and maybe it's just my driving style, but a lot of BMWs complain about understeer, and that's where upgrading your rear sway bar will probably give you the most benefit. But in my case, I went with both the front and rear so that I had a nice balanced setup, and when I went back to the track again, I really didn't have any issues. So I do typically recommend upgrading both if you can. Now, a couple other things I want to mention, of course, is the sway bar bushings, because a lot of cars come with bushings that need to be greased in order to reduce the noise. But on the H&R bars, they actually use a bushing that's already a unique composite that does not need to be greased. So I've had it on my car for about 1,000 miles. I haven't had any squeaking, any noises. It sounds just like stock. And I did not put any grease on the bushing. So, of course, I'll keep an eye on it. If you guys want a long-term review, I'll try to post some updates in the future. But based on my experience with the car so far, it does exactly what I want and nothing that I don't. I think this is a really worthwhile upgrade that a lot of people don't consider because, A, coilovers are just a common mod. Everybody wants to lower their car. And also some people are scared of the install, which hopefully my DIYs help alleviate that concern as well. It's definitely something that you can do in your garage on jack stands without any issues. But yeah, again, a big shout out to H&R for partnering with me on my build. I just kind of, again, wanted to share with you guys why I went with sway bars instead of coilovers or springs, which again, that might happen in the future. But based on my current goals with the car, it met my needs for my recent track day and definitely provided a significant improvement. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it for this video. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope this helps. And if you have any other questions or comments, leave them down below.